Welcome back to the Ascended Centrist podcast. My name is Gerald Mokris, and I am here with the U.S. Senate candidate in the state of South Dakota, the Democrat running in South Dakota, Dan Ahlers. So I appreciate you coming on the show. And if you would, please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to this point to running for the U.S. seat.
Well, thanks for having me on and giving me the opportunity to get your viewers to know a little more about me. I'm a small business owner from Del Rapids. Uh, I actually owned one of the last video stores in South Dakota. I owned and operated for 20 years. I started a coffee shop in my hometown, owned a couple of commercial buildings. I was a government international relations major from Augustana University. My wife, Amy, and I have two boys. Jackson is 13, Aaron is 9. And I spent 6 years in the South Dakota State Legislature, most of that time on the Appropriations Committee, putting together the state's budget.
Okay. And then I also saw that you were the representative in District 25, which is actually my district in Sioux Falls. That's kind of crazy. I didn't even know that like you were running or that you were even like up there for that. So if you could tell us a little bit more about that and like what you kind of did as a representative.
Well, and that was my time in the state legislature, the Appropriations Committee. So a lot of what I did was, the amount of money that's spent on schools each year, Medicaid reimbursements for our healthcare providers, roads, bridges, anything that is part of state funding. I helped put that budget together. And I spent a little time with the South Dakota Retirement Laws Committee that oversees the state retirement system. So I'm familiar with that aspect and how we invest our state employees' dollars and help provide for their retirement. I was appointed to the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. So I was South Dakota's representative nationally on all issues regarding higher education in this country, and then bringing that information back and helping to provide a better environment for our college students in South Dakota.
Okay, well, that's because I didn't even know. I think like a lot of people are so much focused on like federal elections, like, who's going to be the next president, who's going to be all this and that. But I feel like we need to actually focus on like, who's our representative in our district, who's going to be our state senator and, our city. So I actually love that you were representing my district. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's you're absolutely right. Local government is probably as important, if not more important, because the decisions that are made at the local level have more of a direct impact on you and your day-to-day life.
Yeah, I completely agree because, the federal government isn't as, inclusive in, our specific school, our school district as a whole, our city as a whole. So I feel like with more and more people registering, we need to get out and vote in the midterm elections, in the little school elections, all that. So we make sure that we get the right people in that we want representing us.
Well, I think my experience as a state legislator and understanding how state and federal programs and monies merge and intertwine with one another is good, because when you're making policy decisions at that federal level, they'll have a direct impact on the state's ability to do its job. So it's important to understand those relationships.
Yep, I completely agree. Okay, so we're going to move on to talk about the coronavirus and the novel COVID-19. So today in the state of South Dakota, we recently just had 360 new cases, which have resulted in a total of 6,062 total active cases in the state, which is a new record. Total hospitalizations are up to 1,886. Currently, there are 278 cases hospitalized in the state of South Dakota. There have been reports of ICU bed shortages in the state. Our past weekend cases, we have had a total of, on October 7th, 1,030 cases, October 8th, 538 cases, October 9th, 774 new cases, October 10th, 732 cases, October 11th, 617, and of course today, the new 360 cases. There have been a total of 288 dead South Dakotans so far, and a total of 215 dead Americans in the US. So clearly, we are not on the right track. We are the second worst state in terms of positivity rate and worst outbreak in the nation. So I guess from a South Dakotan standpoint, how would a Senator Dan Ahlers help South Dakota in this fight against COVID-19?
Well, I think that some of the most important thing we can do is as this is drawn on, of course, people get tired and exhausted. The bad habits start creeping back in. We're not as cautious. I
Mhm.
think that we need leadership in Washington that sets a good example, that is willing to uh, uh, talk about the facts and what that this is a serious pandemic, that we need to make sure that we're wearing masks. I don't know if mandatory policies is the way to go, but I certainly think that we need to be clear on what the CDC recommendations and guidelines are, and that we need to create an environment where our local governments feel comfortable with setting policies, and that our businesses feel comfortable with enforcing policies and not alienating their customers. As a small business owner, as a chamber president in Del Rapids, I was very involved in COVID at the ground level. When we were looking at what was happening in China and other countries and anticipating that it was eventually going to make its way here, we started planning ahead of time and we met with businesses. We talked to them and said, so if we would end up shutting down, if we would end up limiting the number, and government comes in and limits the number of people you can have in your restaurant or shop, what ways can we help you, as a chamber? What can we do to help you still reach your understanding that the policies at the top are going to have a direct impact to the people at the ground level? And if you can, if you understand that, then you go in with a little better what the potential outcomes can be for your decisions.
Right.
And we were fortunate enough to be ahead of the curve, setting up these carry out parking spots, finding out ways to reach our base that allowed all of our businesses to stay open.
Mhm.
And the great part about that was that we didn't have a single business closed during this so far, which is pretty exceptional.
Oh, yeah.
We were a small town, so those things were important. And I think that we need to do a better job of planning. One of the biggest mistakes that was made, NEC recommendations, social distancing, the mask recommendations, that stuff wasn't done early enough. Had we started promoting those types of practices a week or 2 weeks earlier, we could have saved tens of thousands of lives.
Definitely.
And that's important.
I completely agree.
We
I
also
think,
need to make sure that when we're doing stimulus packages, that the money gets where it needs to, also to keep their businesses open. And what we can do in this next stimulus package is, if we do more of these grants, if we do more unemployment, we set it up so business can cater it to costs and projects like infrastructure, whether it be internet, utilities, roads, bridges, our internet, broadband, those things, if we're investing in those things, they'll help boost our economy.
Mhm.
They'll also put people that are out of jobs, and we just need to have the funding for them. So I think that those are better investments with our stimulus money, and we can make sure that it's also an investment in our future.
Yeah, because definitely when we invest in infrastructure and better internet, better roads, better buildings for our schools and stuff like that, I feel like that gives back to a good return on your investment, better education, better tools to help students learn and,
Yep.
do something well with that. I feel like that's actually a very good step forward from what we have done as far as, wasteful spending, stuff that hasn't had a good return on investment and hasn't really benefited the people. With that being said, would you support a stimulus bill that cuts checks for Americans, like the additional 1,200, the unemployment benefits? Where's your stance on that?
I want to, before I did that again, I'd like to see a little more information about why they pick a certain amount.
Mhm.
I think right now, uh, there are certainly people that are unemployed that could use that money probably more than someone like myself. Uh, it's also, I think, important that we take those dollars and go back to that investment in infrastructure and putting people back to work too.
Mhm.
Things that are going to help improve our economy. Even with with the younger generation, one of the big concerns that they have is the environment, climate change, renewable energy. Once again, we can invest in that type of infrastructure to help hasten that process along.
Definitely. And with a $1,200 check, that only goes so far in a month, let alone the 6, 8 months that we've
Right.
had in the last stimulus bill. So would you support more parts in the CARES Act or even the HEROES Act that, it didn't get passed? Would you support things in those bills that get people direct economic relief?
I think if we make sure that the people that need it get it, I think that's what we really need to focus on. What
Definitely.
what I have read on what most people did with that money was start saving it. Well,
Mhm.
then, and that's not a bad thing,
Right.
but if you're wanting to stimulate the economy,
You want to put it back
then
into the
you want
economy.
people spending.
Yep.
Right. So, you know, the fact that people are saving it is a great thing, but it's also showing that many of them didn't need that dollar and
Hmm.
that we may have been able to invest those dollars in areas that would have had a bigger impact for people. And that doesn't mean that I'm not interested in it. It's just I'd like to see a little more data. When you're actually in office, you have access to a lot more information than you do when you're sitting on the outside. But I have been doing a lot of reading and seeing what the trends are, and then getting department information online to be able to kind of find out. So what's happening? Are we really stimulating the economy? Is this the best approach, or is there another way? Are experts recommending other methods? So I'm always open to looking at things a little closer and then making sure that I have all of the information before I make decisions like that.
And that's a good way to be because we have seen a lot of wasteful spending, people that have not needed it. A lot of small businesses weren't able to get stuff because a lot of big businesses that didn't necessarily need it got it. So, in terms of that and everything else with Washington, how would you work with a conservative Republican like John Thune in the state of South Dakota, let alone other senators across the aisle to get not just economic relief to people, but to also pass laws and legislation that help in the future past COVID-19?
Well, I think you take the same approach you do in the workplace or any workplace. You try to build relationships.
Mm-hmm.
You need to get to know people, find out what's important to them. What you end up discovering is that issues like a good economy, affordable health care, and a good education are not Republican or Democrat issues, they're people issues.
Right.
And when you look at it that way, you have a starting point to have a conversation. And that's what I've always aimed to do as a state legislator. That's why, as one of 16 Democrats out of 105 legislators, I was able to get legislation passed. You have to have Republicans supporting you, but you also have to build that trust. And that's something I did in Pierre, and I would aim to do the same thing in Washington, D.C.
Definitely, because in a time of great political divide in this country, you need bipartisanship. You need to be able to work across the aisle, not just for yourself or your own agenda or the other person's agenda, but to help the actual Americans that need the help. So I do agree with you that we do need to find common ground in what drives us and stuff like that. So, with coronavirus and all that, one thing is that healthcare is on everyone's mind. The ACA is currently in the Supreme Court right now, and people are worried that their healthcare will be taken away. Another important issue for you is that you would like to reduce the cost of healthcare and improve the access to healthcare. So the Republican-led Senate has come forward and said that they have a plan, but so far no plan has been presented to the people, and no one knows what is going to happen. So how would you fight and ensure that South Dakotans everywhere have the best access to healthcare at the best cost available to them?
Well, you made a great point. They've talked about having a plan. They've been talking about having a plan for 12 years.
Definitely.
There is no plan.
There is no plan.
Because the rhetoric of repeal and replace is more popular than politically than actually getting work done. And some of the things that we can do, well, the things to recognize, first of all, is that while people say their health insurance is still increasing, it's increasing at a lower rate than it did prior to the Affordable Care Act.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the initial hike that came in that first year or two was because of the coverage of pre-existing conditions. That's now leveled off. So that's really not a valid argument anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But the importance of preserving those pre-existing conditions and making sure that those people are protected is you have tens of millions of Americans that now have full health care coverage, and it covers whatever medical issue they have at the beginning. So, for example, my best friend Paul, from the time he was a young child, was diabetic.
Mm-hmm.
His parents had health insurance, but because he had this pre-existing condition, it didn't cover things like insulin. So when they couldn't afford it, guess who's not getting it on a regular basis?
Oh.
And my friend Paul had the ACA from the time he was a child. He probably would have spent the last 10 years on dialysis. So what is more cost effective? Insulin or dialysis? Insulin is.
Right.
So over time, some of those costs, if people have access to the healthcare now, will help drive down costs in the future, because those very costly procedures and things that you have to have when you've been ignoring existing health problems are not as frequent or as necessary. So those types of things happen. There's also different models that I've seen in some other states where they have what they call an incident of care, which means they kind of package the whole healthcare opportunity where multiple appointments for one particular health issue, and they package it into one what they call incident of care, and it comes at a price.
Mm-hmm.
If the hospitals are able to provide that cost at an even lower price at the end, when everything is said and done, then they actually get a little more money. So it helps encourage keeping those costs down. That might be something that's worth looking at. Healthcare is very complicated. There's a lot of different facets to it. The most important thing, and what I would offer, is bringing all the players to the table. Usually what happens is assumptions are made where you're addressing one aspect of the issue or one interested or two interested parties, but you don't have everyone sitting at the table at one time having a conversation. When you
Right.
can do that, you'll get all of these perspectives, and it helps you write the plan. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important to take care and ensure that these tens of millions of Americans with pre-existing conditions continue to have protection. It's important for our youth who are going to college and have all these other expenses to be able to stay on their parents' insurance. And for all those states that have expanded Medicaid, the ACA is crucial to providing that health care to those needy families that otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it. If the Supreme Court were to strike ACA down, it would be devastating for millions of Americans in this country. And a lot of state governments would be struggling to provide health care that they're currently providing to their citizens.
Definitely. And especially a lot of South Dakotans I know have most likely benefited from the ACA due to driving costs down, especially with pre-existing conditions. But one other thing that I'd like to talk about is how people that are making above the minimum amount of, you qualify for Medicare. How would you support like a public option to get those people on Medicare? And
You mean Medicare or Medicaid?
oh, Medicaid, excuse me.
Medicaid?
Yes, sorry about that. But how would you support like a public option, or would you just want them to not be fined for having no health insurance?
Well, I think we need to do what we can to help people get access to health care. I think that there are public options out there or private options out there through the marketplace that we could do a better job of. A federal government is working with them and helping provide access to more people. I think we can bridge that at the state level by improving the process for which states are able to apply for Medicaid waivers. And that will help close that gap in between those that can afford health care and those that cannot. Those people that are kind of trapped in between the two systems.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is a lot of times, and once again, this will ultimately help reduce costs, is that you have people that are stuck between Medicaid and private insurance. And they have to make a choice between losing health care for their children or getting an extra 10 hours a week and going full time. So I had a mom that came into my business working 30 hours a week. She doesn't make enough for health care, so she gets Medicaid for her children. She says, Dan, I've been offered a full-time position, but if I take it, I'll lose healthcare coverage for my kids, but I won't make enough to actually buy health insurance. I'll actually go backwards income-wise.
Yep.
Now, it's because we have it set up as an all or nothing system. If we were to allow and work with states to create systems that would allow that mom, as she makes additional money, she pays a little higher copay, or she contributes a little bit to the Medicaid program. Whatever that might be, those are options that can help address those costs, as well as provide people opportunities to work their way off of those programs. But we have to create that pathway, and right now that pathway doesn't exist.
Definitely, because there is a lot of people who are stuck in that kind of, gray area of making too much, making too little, stuff like that. So I do kind of want to move on to another issue. And, in South Dakota, agriculture is a huge part of our economy. It's who we are as a people. One issue that you're fighting for is helping farmers over the state that have been hurt by the trade war with China. Farmers are going bankrupt more often. They don't have as much money. Farmer suicides are actually up from recent years. So what legislation would you support in order to get farmers the much needed help that they need?
Well, I think first we need to find new markets for those crops. We may get some of our trade with China back, but because we went into this unprepared, because current leadership didn't speak up, that damage is permanently done. Even if we made up with China today, we would not get the business back that we lost when the trade wars ensued. So we need to start looking for new markets, new trade partners. We need to go back and get the country of origin labeling back into statute so that farmers are able to, and ranchers are able to market their product to the consumer with transparency. That's something my opponent talks about, country of origin labeling, but he actually voted for the legislation that allows these meat packers to mix foreign beef in with American beef. and there's no transparency for the consumer. Now, if we're real capitalists, if we're really interested in free market, let's have full disclosure. Let them market their product. Let us market our product. And if there's a price difference and people are willing to pay it, then let's do that.
Let them do
We
it.
also need to, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, let's do it, because if we're so focused on capitalism, we need to let the, best product win, in the competition. But please continue.
Yeah. And I think that I see a lot of opportunities in agriculture and green energy. This is something that doesn't get talked about very much, but farmers can be our leaders in clean and renewable energy. They're already starting some of those practices now. And so in encouraging those programs to help them make those transitions, whether it be with the cover crops, new crops that help uh, improve soil quality, no-till, all of those types of things. And maybe it's improving agricultural insurance on crops that normally weren't covered before. Whatever we can do to reduce risk and improve opportunities for agriculture should be looked at. And I think that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there. I think that we should be doing more to get buffer zones along our waterways, to have more land in CRP, but we have to be able to be willing to pay the farmers to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's better for our environment. It's better for our natural habitat. It's better for, if you're a pheasant hunter, having these buffer zones and strips and CRP land is better for hunting. There's a multitude of benefits that come with good ag policies. And I'm once again willing to sit down and listen to the farmers and their representatives on agriculture. And like I said, particularly with green energy, there's some big opportunities here. And for once, I'd like to see South Dakota as a leader in that, because agriculture is our number one industry in South Dakota. And right now it's struggling. And they just need people that are going to.
Most definitely, and all in the whole Midwest, we're an agriculture base, we're a farming base. We need to get our farmers back to selling their crop and making money off it. I know that a lot of farmers would rather sell their crop and make a profit themselves than have the government write them a check and say, "Oh, sorry for your loss." So,
Well, and that happened during the pandemic too. Here,
mm-hmm.
At the very beginning, you had almost 40 million Americans out of work. Food pantry shelves were going bare. And on the other side of that, we had farmers that had milk spoiling, food rotting, and animals being slaughtered and having to pay the expense to bury them.
Mm-hmm.
Where was our leadership stepping up and standing on the doorstep of the USDA going, we have all this product, all these people over here need it, let's get this done. If they'd have done that, the farmers would have been paid and people would have been fed. Instead, it cost our farmers money, and they lost money again. And even with those subsidies, they still took a loss. And that's not right.
Especially when our economy is so centered around, feeding the world and making sure that we're able to produce food for everyone. That's one of the building blocks of life. And I think it was kind of sad that how it's such like a morale killer that, our farmers weren't able to produce because the leaders in Washington weren't able to step up and actually fight for us.
And we need to be thinking about the next generation of farmer. Right now, if you wanted to get into farming, unless you had a family member or you knew somebody that could get you kickstarted financially, there is no way for you to become a farmer in South Dakota right now, because it's too expensive and no one's going to give you the money to do it. So what does that mean for the future of agriculture? We have to do a better job to create programs that will allow people to start a new farming operation if they want to. that needs to happen. And I think that, it's no different than having a small business administration, only it's a small business administration for farmers. Right now, the average age of the farmer in South Dakota is right around 65, maybe even a little older now. How is that sustainable long term? So
Right.
we need forward thinkers and people that are willing to uh, help encourage the next generation of farmer.
Most definitely. And I see another one of your main issues that you're fighting for is promoting more renewable energies and making sure we kind of lessen our burden on fossil fuels. So how do you think promoting renewable energies such as like water, solar, wind, all that would help South Dakota farmers directly?
Well, I think with wind energy, they have a financial benefit when they sign contracts with these companies. We want to make sure that those remain fair. But I also think that these farmers with their large livestock operations have a lot of manure that they can use their digesters. They can turn it into fertilizer, which they already do. They also can use that manure and use the methane off of that to fuel other things, and that is all natural and isn't pumping the ground or fracking. Uh, it's not coal. One of the interesting things that you find, the Sioux Falls landfill actually helps fuel the Chancellor ethanol plant with the methane from all the waste that is in that dump. It is helping power another renewable energy source. Lots of opportunities to get creative. The thing that we have to make sure with our renewable energy policies is that if we're committed to moving in that direction, that we are working with even the fossil fuel industry to show them that there is a financial benefit and that they should get on board and be part of it too. One of the worst things that we can do as elected officials is create these policies that are intended to do good things, like clean up our environment and promote, create other problems as a result. And what I mean by this is about a decade ago, we started making changes to our fossil fuels policies well, that made the coal in Wyoming very coal, but those mines in Virginia and West Virginia, all of a sudden that product isn't worth much anymore, and you see an industry die, but nobody was there helping make an economic transition in those communities. Uh, the government made a policy change, but didn't do anything to help provide that transition for on-job training to help those local economies. And you had towns die out, more people in poverty, more people without health care. So we have to be mindful that when we make these policies, that it's comprehensive and that it is anticipating a change in an industry, that we don't do as much damage as good.
Right. And I feel as South Dakotans, we have a duty to kind of lead the nation in, how are we going to be able to move forward in the future while maintaining our traditions of being farmers.
Yeah, it's all about balance, and it happens over time. The incremental steps uh, can help mitigate problems that you can create during policy, because as you do it incrementally, if a problem comes up, you can address it on the spot, and you can hash through that idea again, make some changes, and keep things moving forward without having the devastating effects of trying to take a ship and do a 180 on the spot. So
Right.
it's all about a little common sense and good policy.
Definitely. And, as farmers are, kind of buried under the burden of, a lot of the other big issues that are going on. Another group of people that I feel doesn't get talked about enough on the local and the federal level is Native Americans. And today is Native American Day in South Dakota. We're one of the few states and places that actually celebrates Native American Day instead of Columbus Day. As a Native myself, Natives are disproportionately affected disproportionately affected by COVID-19 and other health issues, while at the same time, we don't seem to get the help that other states or regions and even other countries receive. India received ventilators from the US while the Navajo Nation was still hurting from COVID 19. On a day like today, what can you tell natives in South Dakota and on reservations in the US that you will do to let them know that you are fighting for them? And how will you work with tribal leaders and federal government officials in order to get legislation done?
Well, I spent a couple years on tribal relations in the state legislature, and I've watched, even at the state level, how little respect our native tribes are given. And over the years, the legislature has passed laws that affect our native nations and reservations without ever including them in the conversation. And I go back to this over and over again. Our native people need to have a seat at the table, need to be able to share their ideas and concerns and actually be heard. The federal government uh, has yet to live up to its obligations from the treaties that it signed more than 100 years ago. And I think that we can do better. I want to be that bridge between cultures, between nations, and really it's incumbent upon the federal government to make the first move. We've done nothing to build trust with our native tribes. We have promised education, health care, sovereignty. We've made a lot of promises and we haven't really lived up to those. And when you look at the issue of COVID on the reservations and the recent issue with our governor and some landowners over whether or not there could be checkpoints on these reservations, how can we tell a uh, a group of folks who are at higher risk than a large portion of the population that you don't have the right to protect your borders when we aren't even there to help provide the quality of health care they would need should there be a massive outbreak? That would be devastating for people on our native reservations because they do not have access to the quality of health care needed to handle a pandemic like this. And I think you pointed it out earlier. We sent ventilators to other countries, but what did we do for our Native American tribes? And it we just have a lot of work to do, and I want to be part of that. I want to tell the Native people of South Dakota that you have someone that will champion your cause, that will be there and listen to you. And I know those seem to be empty promises that they've heard over and over again, but I have always been there to listen and work with other people, uh, whether it's protecting minorities, protecting people with disabilities, or just my neighbor across the street. It's in my DNA, it's who I am. And I think we have some opportunities here. And we need to right some of these wrongs and at least honor our promises. What good are we if we can't at least honor our promises?
Definitely. And it's so nice to hear that someone is actually willing to step up to the plate and tackle this big issue because you hear empty promises that have never been kept. But for someone to actually come up and say, I'm willing to be the bridge between, moving forward in the past, like it's so nice to finally hear that someone that is running is willing to take Native American issues into account for.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I appreciate what you're doing. Lastly, I want to talk about, we are a deep red state. We've voted Republican for the last, 8 presidential elections since 1964 was the last time we voted for a Democrat for president. So as a businessman, what is your pitch to Republicans and independents like myself to, vote for you and support you?
Well, I think you can look to my legislative record to see that I am someone who is there to represent people. Most of the bills that I've brought over the years have come straight from individuals just like yourself. Uh, I didn't focus on the shiny leadership positions the leadership recognition I got, whether it was the three national, my recognition locally with my work with children with disabilities, it's all been done by bringing people together and working together to get things done. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat or independent, it doesn't matter to me. What matters is making government work for you, making sure that your voice is heard and represented, and and that you have someone that you feel that listens to you and that is willing to work for you. The the thing that got me into this race was the, watching all of this partisanship that's going on, the inability to get things done, and people losing faith in our government. And we're supposed to be the example for the rest of this, for every other democracy in this world. And when we're failing, we're giving our enemies a foot into the door, in the door, and telling all these other democracies, look, that big shining city on a hill isn't so shiny now, is it? If they can't do it, how are you going to do it? And the idea that Democrats don't work in a red state, I served in a very conservative district, District 25. I'm the only Democrat to have won in there in the last decade. So that shows you that I'm common sense, moderate. But also in the history of South Dakota, for nearly 4 decades, 2 of those 3 spots in Congress were held by Democrats. The state didn't burst into flames. The state was very successful during that time frame. Farmers got the aid they needed when there was drought, when it was floods. They did better then than they're doing now. When it comes to saving Ellsworth Air Force Base, that was Tim Johnson and Tom Daschle. You had people there fighting to make sure that that got done. The Lewis and Clark Water Project, which has been essential to access to quality, clean water for our southeastern part of the state, Tom Daschle and Tim Johnson. I mean, Democrats got things done for South Dakota. The South Dakota state retirement system, Dick Knight, our last elected Democratic governor, that was his project. So I don't think that one party has all the answers. And I think that sending someone like me as a Democrat to Washington, you're going to get more from me than you're currently getting from all 3 current elected officials. And I'm going to push my other 2 colleagues to do even more, because now there's going to be a little bit a more complete representation for South Dakota in Washington.
I completely agree with what you said. No one party has the book of answers. There's definitely needs to be a lot more bipartisanship and working together. South Dakota is already underrepresented on the national level. We're outshadowed by bigger states that push their issues more than us, but we can work together and actually build a better future for us in the Midwest and South Dakotans in general.
Absolutely. And it just takes people that are willing to do that. Instead of pointing fingers and blaming each other, somebody that's just interested in getting work done.
I completely agree. Oh, well, thank you for doing this with us. Now we got done with all the big issue questions. Now we have a few fun questions that, it's like 5 questions. It's nothing too serious. It's just like your favorite stuff. So to begin, what are your favorite sports teams?
Well, in basketball, it would be the Celtics.
The Celtics. I
grew up with Larry Bird and Robert Parrish. I'm a different generation. But, considering the Lakers just won, I would love to see a Celtics-Lakers finals again. Some of my best memories as a young boy were those Magic Johnson, Larry Bird matchups. They were pretty phenomenal. It was some incredible games to watch. For football, I'm a Denver Broncos fan. I spent time growing up West River and in Gillette, Wyoming. So it's kind of it was the team to watch back then, and we won a couple of Super Bowls. We lost a
Hmm.
few Super Bowls, but it's pretty exciting. It was a pretty exciting time. Oh, gal, what else do we have? We have baseball. I'm a Twins fan.
All right.
Um, I was there when they won a championship in '87 and '91. Uh, we haven't found an answer for the Yankees. I thought
Yeah.
we didn't have to play the Yankees. I thought, hey, we have a chance this year, but no, they lost again. So
Yeah, they lost again. Shocker.
maybe I need to dust off my bat and go try out for the team.
Might as
So
well.
I played amateur ball. I mean, it's got to be close, right?
Exactly. I think you do great. Yeah, I'm a Lakers fan. So I'm not a bandwagoner, but I grew up watching like Kobe and the Celtics Lakers rivalry. So that was kind of like my Magic Larry, watching Kobe versus, KG, Paul Pierce, all
Yeah,
them.
I mean, it's just a great rivalry.
It's a historic rivalry too, goes
Yes,
way back.
yes.
All right. So next question, what is your favorite food?
Ooh, gosh, I do like burgers, but I'd have to say a good steak,
Yeah, you can't
uh,
beat that.
a
Steak
good
and
a good
potatoes, you can't beat
sirloin.
it. You can't beat it.
I I uh, I like it so much. I tried. I don't know if you ever seen the movie The Great Outdoors
I
with John
haven't.
Candy. He goes to this lodge in Minnesota and he has the old 96er. It's a 96-ounce steak. That's huge.
Holy cow.
But in Mitchell, at the depot in Mitchell, they have a 48-ounce steak, and I got a free T-shirt out of it. But you had to eat the whole thing.
Oh wow.
That's a lot of meat.
Yeah.
But I managed to do it. The steak was as big as my plate,
Yeah, I
and
imagine.
then I had the potato and the salad to go with it on separate plates. But uh, there's nothing like a good steak.
Are you a well done or like a medium rare kind of guy? What are you?
Well, not medium, not rare, but I can eat it on the red side. I would say I'm medium to medium well.
Same. Same. It tastes best that way.
Just has a little extra. It's just the right type of juicy then.
Right. And with that being said, what is your favorite local restaurant? And it can be South Dakota, Sioux Falls, it don't matter, wherever.
Uh, I love to go to a lot of different places. So sometimes it depends on the category.
Mhm.
But if it's a coffee shop, I like locally owned coffee shops. I'm not into the franchises. So I'll go to a variety of different coffee shops, like the Source or Coffea or Liddell and Forth. If I'm eating Mediterranean food, Sanaz down in 8th and Railroad is fantastic. But I also, just for fun, I do this with my boys a lot. Is we'll hop on the trail in the bike trail over by Sertoma Park, and we'll bike over and go to Mama Lada's for their enchiladas.
Oh yeah,
So
Mama's
that
Ladas is good, and Mama's Fried. They have a Philly shop.
Philly
Oh,
steak one,
you
yes,
cannot beat that. You cannot beat it. I promise. That is good.
yeah.
That,
Mama Lada's is kind of like the thing that the boys and I do. We'll bike in, we'll eat lunch, do the sculpture walk, and then bike back. So uh, that's fun. Yeah,
that's a lot of exercise and a good meal after. I
yeah.
like
Well, you got to work it off once you eat it.
that is true. Yeah.
Otherwise, you
Um,
still look like the enchilada.
what is your favorite video game?
Oh gosh, I'm old school. I'm at the early age of video games, so Ms. Pac-Man.
Okay, a classic. There you go.
Yeah, that one in Tetris. I used to rule. I would set the records on those at Augustana. We had a couple of them sitting in our back alley, which was the hangout spot.
Yeah.
I held the record on that.
Dang. Do you think it's still there or is it long
No,
gone?
they're not there anymore.
Oh, they're not. Oh,
I actually have one of the arcade games from Augustana. They quit working, so they said, "Do you want it?" And I'm a bit of a collector, so I have one sitting in my garage right now. Burger time. So,
last question. What is your favorite genre of music, artist, band?
ooh, varies by mood, but folk music has a special uh, place for me. That the the songs of James Taylor, um, Carole King, Van Morrison, that type of music, I
Okay.
really, really like. And I guess you would kind of throw that in the folk side of things.
Yeah,
It's not quite rock or pop, but I don't know. There's a lot of soul in that music.
there
I,
is. Yes.
I love jazz and singers like Nora Jones. Um, just fantastic voices. Yeah, look
Okay.
for music with a little deeper meaning. But I also love 80s rock. So, and I
Yep.
don't know how much meanings in 80s rock, but I like it.
Yeah, my mom loves 80s rock, so I kind of grew up listening to that too.
We got to listen to Sunny Radio then, 93.3.
Yeah, my mom usually had that on. I haven't rode in the car with her in a while, but I imagine she's got that on.
You get to travel back in time every weekend, Saturday and Sunday. They will play Casey's American Top 40, the 80s, and it'll be whatever week we're in, 1980, whatever. And you'll hear the original broadcast in its entirety. So
Oh
it's kind
wow.
of like a little time travel. So
Oh,
it's a
like a
lot of fun.
nostalgia. Yeah, a lot of nostalgia. That is great. That's great. Oh, well, thank you so much for doing this. We appreciate it. You're welcome back anytime. Invite's always there. If you guys want to go to danahlers.com, DANAHLERS.com. He has all of his issues that he's fighting for South Dakota. He has the donation tab. He has all the stuff that makes Dan Dan. And we appreciate you coming on. And thank you very much.
Anytime, just give me a call.
Yes, sir.